Before we formally welcome Chrissy Holliday to Mohave College, let me take a few minutes to review the ground rules for the public forums. We have asked the candidate to provide a brief, structured talk for 10 minutes. We have 3 general questions that we have been prepared to help facilitate the session. I will ask each question and allow the candidate to respond. When you entered the room, you received a note card. Please write your questions on the note card, and the forum liaison will come around and collect the cards throughout the session. 5 minutes before the end of the session, we will ask the candidate to provide brief closing remarks. A feedback survey link has been or will be provided. These survey results will be delivered to the Board of Governors to be included in their deliberation. We will not accept feedback forms submitted after Thursday, the 26th at noon. We thank you all, and let us begin.
All right, everyone, are you guys ready? Awesome. I got to throw a little bit of energy in here. Is that okay? All right, it is a morning, right? All right, so we're going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Chrissy Holliday. Just a little brief bio of her. She's a vice president for enrollment management and student success at Cal Poly Humboldt. Previously, she was a senior system liaison for rural education and workforce development initiatives at Colorado State University. I want you guys to give her a warm, big round of applause, Dr. Chrissy Holliday.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Good morning, folks. How's everybody doing? Good? I'm really happy to be here with all of you today, and thank you for this opportunity. I know I'm supposed to talk a little bit about the value of community colleges and then how I would look to move your mission and vision forward here at Mohave College. I'm going to start a little bit with a story. I do storytelling, so I'm going to start with that. That tells you a little bit about what I believe is the value of community colleges and how I came to that belief. So, one of the things that you should know about me is higher education was not my first career. It was actually my third. My first career was as a newspaper reporter. That's what I was trained in, and that's what I did for a number of years. And then I moved into community and workforce development with a community development corporation in rural South Carolina. A very small area that was served by a 2-year campus, a 2-year regional campus in the University of South Carolina system. And so it was a community college type structure. Didn't do the career and technical education, but did transfer associate's degrees, dual enrollment, community education, those sorts of things. And that campus was the only higher education institution in a 5-county area. And the governor put it on the list for closure. And so, doing the work you do, you can imagine the impact that that would have had in that rural community. And the institution at the time did not have anyone who was focused on community outreach and public relations. But they knew I did that work at the Community Development Corporation. So they reached out to that CDC and said, "We need help. We need Chrissy. We know you need office space." And that's how I got traded for office space and became part of a community college. And so my first job with them, half of my work was really devoted towards making the case of the importance and the value of community colleges. And we effectively fought back against the closure and then went into a period of huge growth for that institution. We started building programs. So, very similar to what you're doing, we started putting in 4-year programs. And so, we partnered to bring 4-year nursing program, 4-year education, all of those sorts of things. And eventually I transitioned permanently to that institution and began working for them full time. And that's where I found my love. So I always say I tripped and fell into higher education. When I was a first generation college student, I had no clue you could be a college administrator, that was even a job. But once I realized that that's something that I could do, I fell in love with it and have never wanted to do anything else. And so that started a 20-year love that I've had with higher education. What I learned about the value of community colleges and their presence in the community from that experience was really our ability to connect students with their dreams and to do that regardless of a zip code. right? It should not matter where you live as to whether you have access and the ability to prove yourself and to be successful. Now, there's a lot of research out there about the value of community colleges and that education. I think one of the first pieces that we all think about is access, right? We basically throw our doors open and we say, come here, prove yourselves, take this opportunity and do really well, and we're going to help you with that. And I think that's one of the most important pieces. It's the part that resonates for me and is why I've been doing enrollment work for over 20 years, right? That is what I love and believe in. The next is affordability. We want students to be able to graduate without crippling debt, right? And we make that possible. We also know that they have a lot of things going on in life. They have a lot of expenses that they need to think through, and we want to make sure that getting their education, moving themselves forward, however that looks, is not something that makes them question whether they can put food on the table for their families or keep doing the job that they're doing, right? So access and affordability are two of those main pieces. The other value that I see in community colleges is really the range of needs that we help support for students in our community. If you think about it, there's everything from, and I touched on this earlier, but from students who are doing coursework for transfer, those who are getting the 2-year degrees, the career and technical education, people who want short courses, right? There's something they're interested in, they want to learn a little bit more. Community colleges, that's what we do. And we have to be able to do that and do it well and serve that variety of needs. And one of the fourth major values is the tie to career focus, right? We've heard a lot about skepticism that exists about higher education broadly these days. You don't see as much of that with community colleges, and it's because there's a direct connection, right, with the education students are receiving to the work they're going to be doing, and they can see that. We need to make sure they see that value because it goes to that overall perception of the importance of the work we do. So in my mind, all of that comes together with those thoughts about the value of community college to how we would move Mohave College's mission forward and the vision and the work that you've been doing. So when I think about that mission that I've read, Mohave College serves our communities, empowering students to succeed through innovative pathways and quality education. There are pieces of that that mean very different and specific things, right? So we're talking about empowering students. It goes to what I mentioned about connecting their dreams with reality and really making that possible. That's what we're in the business of doing. That requires centering their experience. Nationally, more than 50% of first-generation students end up at community colleges. I was a first-generation student. I didn't start at a community college, but I know the impact of colleges on students who don't have those other resources and they're not quite sure how they're going to make that work, right? Success, though, the succeed piece of it, we talked about the variety of reasons that people come to a community college. Students' definition of success is very different. Per student, they're here for different reasons, and what success looks like to them may be very different than what it looks like for us for funding formulas, for national tracking purposes, and all of that. What matters is what the student sees as success for them. That's what we're here to make happen for them and to make sure connects. And then it's our job to translate that later in some other way to other people who are looking at specific metrics with success and to explain how all of that ties together. The innovative pathways piece, you're already doing this work, right? And so in my mind, there's two pieces of the innovative pathways. There's the academic programs, the 4-year programs that you're adding, the 2-year programs, the partnerships and contract work that you're doing with a number of the business and industries in the area. But there's also the pathways in to the institution, and those need to be innovative as well. And you're also doing that work from everything I've heard. From the high school learners program, college for kids, all of those sorts of things are ways to bring the community in, to make them feel welcome, and to say, hey, you belong here, and here's where we want to see you move forward with Mohave College, with all of that. The quality education piece, there's, of course, what happens in the classroom, right? You're going to make sure that the courses that you have, the programs that you're serving are relevant, that they're tied to workforce needs, they're tied to the larger national landscape. But more than anything, I think all the other pieces that I just referenced, the fact that everything is practical, that it's results focused, that it's tied to the students' own definitions of success, also wraps everything into that quality education piece. It's an entire landscape that determines whether students are successful, whether there's a quality education. So, to wrap all of this up, the question would be, how would I, as your president, help moving all of this forward, right? And for me, simply, I would say it starts with learning from all of you about what the needs are, what the pieces are that need to move forward next, and then helping to develop those relationships and partnerships and starting strategically put the pieces together to make all of those next steps happen. I've been known and I've been brought in different places to unite teams together to make big things happen, right? So where I'm at currently, we're trying to grow enrollment by over 50% in just a few years. I've done a lot of those sorts of very difficult things in the past, and I'm not scared to do those things, and would be very happy to be part of bringing that here to Mohave College. I think my experience, both with 2-year and 4-year institutions, can be very beneficial, and I look forward to having the opportunity to learn from all of you and talk a little more about that while I'm here.
Thank you, Chrissy. We now have some general questions before we move to the audience questions. The first question is, please share with us why you think you should be the next president of Mohave College.
So I think I touched a little bit on that in my opening statement, right? From everything I have seen, Mohave is moving on a trajectory upwards, right? And you've been doing a lot of the hard work. From some of the things I've heard, some of you are exhausted from the hard work that you've been doing, right? There's been a lot that's been happening. What I have been good at, what I have gotten known for over the years, is supporting the people that I work with to get to the next big goal, but to do it without completely exhausting ourselves, to take time to celebrate the wins that we have, because those are important to carry us forward into the next phase of everything that we're doing. Relationships are very important in the work that you are doing here. It takes outreach into the communities, especially with the number of campuses that you have and the different communities that are represented that you're serving. It takes someone who's willing to go out and build those relationships, bring the community in, and start talking really seriously about partnerships. Because it's on us to serve, but it's also on us to be able to ask the community for help and for support, and to tell them the best ways that they can do that for us and how we can pull that together. And so when I look at what you've already done, first of all, I'd be really excited to be here and be part of that. But when I look at what you still have left to do, I think my experience and the opportunities that I've had in the past align pretty strongly with what you need to be able to move forward. And that's why I would like to be here. The other piece I'll say is place, a sense of place. For any institution that you work at, but particularly community colleges, where you live, where you are, matters an awful lot. I'm familiar with the communities that you serve. I've spent time in these areas before. When I lived in Pueblo, Colorado, we would take a lot of family trips down to this area. So I also know the area and already have an affinity for the area as well. So that's a little bit about my why.
Dr. Chrissy Holliday, your next question is, please give one specific example of how your management style has helped to move an initiative forward.
Sure. So I'll mention a little bit about my management, and I would say to my leadership style, and then give you an example. And it's an example that at first you may say, why in the world is she telling us about this? Because that's not something that would happen here. But it was a pretty high stakes time for our campus. And so I think it's important, and it demonstrates that approach to management and leadership. So the first thing I'll say is that, and I touched on this, I don't think you can start as a newspaper reporter where no one talks to you unless they want to, and then move into community development work where you're having to convince people to go after multi-million-dollar grants and to do hard work for them if you're not willing to build relationships and talk to people, right? And so that's just the basic level of where I start. I'm willing to have those tough conversations. I'm willing to go out and bring people in and to help find what piece of projects make sense for them to be involved with. What is it that would benefit them, their organization, their community to joining with us on something? And so that's where I always start, right? You can't do that without strong relationships already existing, without people believing that you care about them in some way, right? And that comes from being authentic. And so I would say anyone who's ever worked with me would tell you that I'm collaborative, I'm authentic, and that I build those relationships with people. So now a little bit about the story. So I'm currently at Cal Poly Humboldt, which is in extreme northern California. It is a campus that is known for activism and for students coming because they want to see change in the world. That also means that there is a lot of protest on our campus. And so, as the VP of Enrollment Management and Student Success, anything that has to do with students and student life falls in my area. In 2024, spring of 24, you folks may remember there were a lot of protests nationally that happened. Humboldt was one of those that went through a pretty significant protest. We ended up with our administration building occupied for 9 days. And those of us who were in leadership at the time, for various reasons, weren't as directly involved with that process of moving forward as we could have been. And I'm the only VP left from that point in time. We've had a presidential transition. And when our interim president came in, I said, we need to do things differently. We need to work differently with our students, with our faculty and staff, to make sure this doesn't happen this way again. The California State University system also made some changes with expectations for time, place, and manner policy. No more occupations came down as a requirement, those sorts of things, right? We weren't the only campus in the system that had those issues. And so, as someone with a First Amendment and journalism background, I got tagged as your it with free speech and developing free speech structures on our campus. As you can imagine, with everything that happened, police intervention, student arrest, all of that, our campus was really raw over it. And there wasn't an awful lot of trust either. And it took rebuilding trust. A lot of those were with our faculty. I spent the summer in between having more random coffee and beers one-on-one with faculty who did not want to meet me somewhere in public. So in the most out-of-the-way places you could ever imagine in Humboldt County, to have conversation about what could we do differently? What should it look like to honor the place we are, but to do what we need to do moving forward? And so we built a new infrastructure that engages faculty, staff, and students in how free speech moves forward on our campus. We have a team that supports any of those free speech activities. We have managed over 50 protests on our campus in the last year and a little bit without any issue until about 3 weeks ago, when I actually got the call I was a finalist here. I was huddled in a hallway with a student occupation of a room and was trying to keep it to a room instead of spreading to the entire building. And the great news is we got out of that very well. I stayed on that hallway and the floor for 14 hours, talking to the students and working through all of that. I had faculty join me in a way that they never have before, and we were checking in with the students. And when, after 14 hours, the students left, and we had set up continued conversations around their concerns, which are all things that actually our campus can't control, and that was the part that they were having a hard time understanding. We did so well with it that the system office has been asking us to talk through it with the other 22 campuses so that they can build programs similar to what we built. And so the reason that it worked the way it worked is because we took the time to go out and talk to people across campus, because I was willing to not mind if they were going to hide their conversations with me somewhere else, just to hear from them and to bring everyone in to be a part of that. And so that's the approach that I bring to management and to leadership. That was a really big, really high stakes example, but it's the same process that I follow in the day-to-day.
Thank you. The next question, please describe your financial management experience.
Sure. So I would say currently my financial management experience is on two levels, right? So as a vice president for the university, I have responsibility for balanced university budget overall, and I'm part of the team that is required to manage that. And then I have responsibility for my division budget, right? So I'll start with the university-wide budget. We have a university committee that manages budget, and I sit on that committee. And that committee is responsible for making a recommendation to our executive cabinet and to our president every year for what the budget should look like moving forward. Now, the reality, I haven't seen a time at Humboldt since I've been there that we haven't been in a reduction mode. So that is the honest place where we have been. Those conversations each year are, how are we going to reduce, right? What does it look like to cut budget? And as you can imagine, those aren't the most comfortable conversations. But we've developed a pretty good process for that with transparency, with openness, where everybody gets to understand. There was a time when the university would take an across the board approach, right? Where if we had to reduce 5%, everybody reduced 5%. And it worked. It made people feel like things were fair, but it wasn't necessarily strategic for the institution, right? And so what we follow now, and I'm part of this, is we've set out values that matter to the campus, what we are absolutely going to protect, what we are going to keep as center moving forward. All of the VPs are responsible for putting together potential reductions from their divisions. I work with my division leads on that. And we divide them into green, yellow, and red. And green means we can cut this, and it's not really going to bring into question our ability to do the things we need to do. Yellow is, we might be pushing out timelines on some of our strategic priorities. There may be some impacts. And red is, if we cut this, we are not going to be able to do the things that we have said are important and that we want to do. And then all of the VPs present that to the campus broadly. And then the budget committee uses that to make recommendations back to the president. And what usually happens is you no longer see across the board cuts. It's take this percentage from this division, this percentage from that, because we are trying to hold our ability to support our students as harmless as we possibly can. And we know we have those significant growth goals as well, right, that require investment. So that's a little bit about how that works at the university level. At the division level, I'm responsible for, so I've said enrollment management and student success. Just so you know, we're a primarily residential campus, so a little bit different from some of the other CSUs that are primarily commuter campuses. And so I have housing and dining operations as auxiliaries as part of my student fee areas as well. I also have student health center, a lot of those that are revenue raising. So my standard base budget is a little over 14 million. With all of our auxiliaries, our fee revenues, and all of that, I manage just under 60 million for the campus. And so it's a fairly extensive budget. And so if you think about the process I just described at the campus level, bringing that down into the individual units and working with all of those directors to manage and oversee those budgets, in addition to the grant budgets that we have as well. That's a little bit about my experience there.
So, Dr. Chrissy Holliday, we have about 19 minutes left. And in this next segment of this forum, we're going to have some questions from the audience. The first question is, Mohave College is navigating a period of significant growth. How would you ensure strong shared governance and transparent decision making while advancing initiatives and institutional priorities?
Thank you for that question. So first of all, a period of strong growth is a great place to be, right? There are a lot of institutions across the nation that aren't there. And so that's something to stop and recognize and celebrate, I think. How you continue that and you continue shared governance and a commitment to transparency starts with a lot of what I've already said, right? Building the relationships, getting to know people, communicating. So a lot of it is showing up, right? On most campuses, we have structures in place for governance, for us to be able to come together, to share what's going on, to seek feedback, and buy-in from folks on things. And sometimes leadership doesn't show up in those spaces the way that they need to, right? And so that is something that I would commit to doing, is to being present in those spaces and being there and being part of the conversation. I try to live by a no surprises rule as best I can. If the first time that my faculty or staff colleagues hear about an initiative that I'm doing is when it goes out into the media, and they're surprised and they come to me and say, Chrissy, what were you thinking? Then I haven't done my job right. Things should not get pushed out and move forward until there's at least been the opportunity for people to weigh in and to help shape that. And not just give an opinion, a blessing or yes or no, but actually be part of building it. And I know there are different people with different approaches to that. Again, I say mine is settled in the fact that I came out of the community building and grants building piece. I would never have been able to get folks to buy in to being part of, 5 and 10-year commitments to what they were going to do for grants if they weren't part of actually building what that would have looked like. And people are not going to buy in to doing what needs to be done in a community or at a college if they're not part of helping to set that vision and set that direction moving forward.
Thank you very much. Our next question. As community colleges are increasingly measured by workforce outputs, what specific concrete actions would you take to ensure we continue to elevate the importance of general education in critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and the building an educated, civically engaged populace?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think in higher ed, we've created this dichotomy of it's either workforce related, career focused, or it's critical thinking and it's general education. And I think that's a false dichotomy. That's easier than trying to explain to people the importance of general ed and all of that. We need to take the time to be able to do that. We need to be able to put forward the explanation of whether you call them soft skills, those pieces that employers want. Because here's what I know from talking with employers. So where I am currently is a polytechnic, right? And so yes, it's a 4-year institution, but it's very hands-on, it's career focused. Everything that we do is tied to the workforce needs of that region, right? We've added close to 22 new programs in the last few years. All of those were designed with the regional workforce needs in mind. They were things that our development partners came forward and said, this is what we need. Part of that was, here is what we are not seeing in today's graduates that we need to be seeing. Things like, how do you work in teams? How do you think critically? Now we're hearing a lot about AI, and students are coming out not even knowing not just how to use it, but how to ethically use some of those things, right? All of those are pieces to what we should be doing in education and putting it together. So we're always going to have the career outputs that we're responsible for being able to report on, but we need to find a way to talk about the rest of it too. And I would say to leverage our partners in the community, in industry and workforce to talk about the importance of those pieces to them and help us make that argument more broadly to everyone else as well.
Dr. Chrissy Holliday, your next question is as follows. As Mohave College continues to grow across multiple campuses, how would you intentionally cultivate a culture of clear communication, strong support for faculty and staff, and trust across the institution?
Huh. So there's a few things I think buried in that question, right, that I'm hearing. There's the communication again, which we've started talking about. There's the trust building, and there's the multiple campuses and the identity and the need to stay connected there, right? So one of the things I'll say that may not be obvious if you've looked at my background or even with this talking that I've done so far, every campus that I have ever, or every institution I've ever worked at previously has had multiple campuses. And so that's something that I'm used to. That's a navigation that I'm used to being able to do. So I'll go all the way back to when I was in South Carolina. I mentioned we served 5 counties. We had 2 primary campuses that were about an hour and 10 minutes apart. And I had offices in both, right? I was expected to be represented in those. That was actually a little bit simpler than the rest of the counties that we didn't have a campus in, but we still served, right? And that was in very intentionally figuring out ways to be present in those communities, to be seen, to be known, so that people could bring their concerns, their interests and needs forward. And so I think some of it, back to what I was saying with the shared governance response, is showing up. is being present, being seen, being known, making that effort, and strategically doing that. And so that is something that I would commit to doing, and something that you could expect from me as your president. Communication, that is something that I think every college president will say. Everybody says I don't communicate, and I send all these emails, and I don't know what else to do. And email is part of it. It definitely is. If there's a benefit, it's I came out of a communication side. So that desire to connect, that desire to keep people up to date on what's going on, whether it's emails, whether it's one-on-one meetings, special sessions, whether it's video messages here and there, to keep people connected and to connect campus in a way that people are, I mentioned celebrating. People are sharing information, people are celebrating across the campuses. Our wins, the things that have worked really well, and also give us time to work together on what comes next with all of that. So that's a little bit about intentionally how I would move forward with that. But it all goes back to the openness, the presence, and those relationships that I've talked about building.
All right. The next question we have for you. How would you strengthen alignment between non-credit workforce development and credit programs to create clear pathways for students while ensuring these initiatives are properly resourced and valued within the institution?
Yeah, that's a great question. This makes me think about what I was saying in the first 10 minutes with recognizing the very different reasons that students come to us, right? And in that, it's not always linear, right? They may come thinking they want one thing, and then they get here, and either life changes and they need to do something a little bit different, or they see opportunity that they've never seen before. And so something that may start as non-credit for them may move into credit, or the opposite direction for some reason, right? And so I think having teams that understand, first of all, really clearly how that would work, what are those paths for students, but that we're open enough so that students can come and tell us about that as well, right? I mentioned that I was a first generation college student. I know that a lot of students, and it depends on the day, something bad could happen one day and you manage it just fine. 3 days later, 5 other things have gone wrong in your life, and that one thing that goes wrong with school could be what completely knocks you off course to be able to continue. And so, what keeps that from happening, what's protective against that, is all of us having intentionally built those pathways, those directions. We've had the tough conversations of what does it mean if a student doesn't go the direction that we really wanted them to, but they choose to go this other way. How are we going to manage that? Because that's something that we can control. And that means we need to have those conversations. We need to map out what are those potential pathways. Where is it currently that there are gaps that the students are falling into? Some of you in the room probably already know what those are. We need to share those, make sure that's happening, and that we're then developing the interventions tailored around that.
Dr. Chrissy Holliday, your next question is based on your exposure, knowledge of Mohave College thus far, what is your priority for improvement, update, or any type of overhaul?
That's a really big question. So I'm about halfway through hearing everything, right? So I don't know that it would be fair to say this is exactly it. I will tell you that what I have heard is pride in everything that's happened so far, and the big things that have been accomplished, because they really have been. Some exhaustion, as I mentioned early, about what it's taken to get there, but a desire to keep going, right? And so one of my first priorities would be to continue gathering that information from all of you and from all of your colleagues when I'm here, hearing more about that, learning, because things that you know that I'm in no position to know today are things like, what have you tried before, and what worked and what didn't, and why? Sometimes that doesn't mean that you don't try it again. It just means you take a slightly different approach when you do it this time, right? Other times it truly means, no, we've tried that and we're not going to, right? Those are the things that I need to learn, that I need to hear from all of you. And so getting that information would be the first priority. But I would say, without a doubt, my center will be making sure that whatever we do and whatever is added, whatever comes next, number one, meets the needs of the communities that we're serving, right? That there is an untapped need that they are looking at Mohave College to fill, and that there are then spaces and careers for our students there once that happens. And then the second is that we can unerringly support our students in that direction and that it results in the outcomes that they're looking for. And so it would be identifying those things that give us the most potential of moving in that area, and then the plan for how we get there. And maybe how we get there with a little bit of rest worked in for folks in between.
Thank you. Our next question is a little bit lengthy, so bear with me while I read it. Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping how students learn, faculty teach, and institutions operate. As president, how would you approach the responsible implementation of AI at Mohave College, balancing academic integrity, faculty autonomy, workforce alignment, while ensuring AI enhances learning rather than replaces critical thinking?
Absolutely. That is another big question, too. Um, it's funny that this comes up. I shared with another group yesterday, I believe, Friday. I was in a training about using a new AI product that our campus is bringing, and our enrollment management team is going to be piloting some of it for the rest of campus to see how it works. And it's basically using some deep research tools. We can toss out questions, things that my team and I have never had the time to dig into. Our institutional research office doesn't have the time to be able to do some of what's going to be done, but we're putting guardrails on what we're going to ask, how we're going to use it, and then let it loose. And then it is going to send us regular reports and updates. And I received the first one, and it's pretty amazing what can happen with that. So I would say there's a difference in my mind of how you use AI for your business purposes, right? And so that's the example that I was just using. We have made the decision in the CSU that if there are ways that we can leverage AI to be able to support our work and to free up our time to do the direct service to students or to others on campus that AI can't do for us in a satisfactory way, but it can buy us a little bit of time, leveraging it in other ways, then that's what we're going to do, right? It's a little more difficult when you talk about it in the classroom. It really depends on the course. It depends on the faculty member's desire. You know, I've seen institutions that have tried to pass policies that are just exactly the same for every use of AI. And I don't know that that works very well. I mean, institutionally, you need a policy around how you're going to use AI, right? What your basic expectations are. But faculty have different thoughts about how it might be useful depending on discipline, depending on what the expectations are going to be when students from that discipline get into the workforce. Some students are going to need to be able to use it. Some students are going to need to be able to talk about the ethics behind what they're doing and make deliberative decisions about those things. It all depends on what field you're going into. And so I think whatever we do with that long term needs to be really thoughtfully approached and based in the reality of each of the learning environments that they have. Faculty members should have it represented in their syllabi so that students know what the expectations are. It's one thing to use it in class as a tool. It's quite another for students to use it to write their papers, right? Which is a very different thing. And so I think setting up those guardrails and making it clear so that everyone understands what the expectations are and how, as a college, we would move forward with that is the right way to go.
Your next question: how would you go about increasing the enrollment of a certain ethnic group or demographic of students that's lacking in enrollment in the college, college wide?
You know, in enrollment and student success is where I have lived the majority of my life in higher education work, and so probably surprising no one, I have a lot of thoughts about how you might do that. You know, most institutions I have worked at have had groups of students that they've been interested in attracting more of, right? whether that's racial or ethnic diversity, whether that's first generation students, whether it's students from a certain geographic area that are underrepresented in your institution for one reason or another. I've worked at some institutions where they had certain high schools that they never had students coming from those schools, right? And so the enrollment management strategy for that is the same, kind of regardless of what specific group you are trying to attract and why. And it has to do with, first of all, why aren't they coming currently? What are we not doing that they tell us they need? Sometimes it's going to where they are. It's even opening our hands in invitation and saying, come here. And sometimes that's as simple as being in the right places, right? Sometimes it's you don't have the atmosphere or the supports and the structures that those students are looking for. You see this a lot of time when you're talking about adult students, transfer students into four-year institutions, veteran students, wherever they are, right? They look at an institution and they say, you weren't built for me, right? And so that's one of the first things that you would do if there is a population that you are not enrolling the way you want to is take a really honest look at what are you doing and what are you not doing, and then build plans around how you go out to where they are, to gather them, to bring them in, and then to make them welcome and successful while they're here.
We now have 6 minutes remaining before the student session. So, Dr. Chrissy, it's time for your closing remarks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Folks, thank you for the time that you took today. I know you had other things you could have been doing, and I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to be here with me, to hear from me, and to ask some questions as well. I think I've gotten a feel for some of the major concerns that are out there, the interest based off of some of the questions. And so I really appreciate that opportunity to learn. There are, I would say, 3 main points that I want to leave you with to consider. I know you're thinking and you're putting your ideas forward about who you want to be your next president here at Mohave College. So some things just to keep in mind when it comes to me. First of all, I'll say I see myself in the students that you serve. I mentioned that I was a first-generation college student, and that means I know the uncertainty that a lot of our students deal with on how they're ever going to make college work. I still remember I was a scholarship student. The only way that I got to make it to college, my parents had no clue how I was going to get there. They had high expectations, but no clear path for me of how that was going to happen, and it was on me to figure it out. They were supportive, they were helpful, but it was my job to figure that out. And I remember the day they dropped me off at my college, and I went to stand in the gymnasium to register for classes because standing in long lines with forms in triplicate is what we did. And my name was called over the loudspeaker, and they said, please report to financial aid. And I remember stopping, my whole heart froze, and I looked at my watch, and I started calculating how far away my parents had gotten and whether they needed to come back to get me because they had figured out I didn't belong there and I wasn't going to be able to make it work. And that was my first thought. Now, I went and I sat in these terrible orange plastic chairs outside of the financial aid office and worried. And then a wonderful lady from financial aid came out and she said, oh, we're going to get this fixed. It won't be a problem. Found out now it was the form of being selected for verification, which I had no clue what that was then. I know that now. And there was just some paperwork that my family needed to do. But in that instant, I was ready to leave. That was the first roadblock for me. And I knew it meant I didn't belong. Now, that same lady in financial aid became my best friend the rest of the time I was there and helped me with everything that I needed because that's what we do, right? We find the person that helps us and we stick with them. And I made it work. But I tell you that initial doubt and worry that a lot of our students have stayed with me when I got my master's degree, my PhD, as I defended my dissertation. That is something that I don't think, if you've ever experienced it, that goes away. And so I bring that to my work every day, knowing that the work we all do matters because it can impact in a given day whether a student walks away or whether they decide to stay there and do what the path that they're on. I'll say for number 2 that I'm committed to working with you to move forward Mohave College's mission and vision. I'm excited about what I've seen here, and I think I can really contribute to moving that forward, to building more of the partnerships and the relationships that you need to help make you successful. To me, that's my job, is to be the chief storyteller for the campuses, to go out and to help the community connect more strongly with our campuses and the work we're doing, and to tell the stories of the good work that you are. And so you can expect that from me, and expect that all the things that we've talked about today are what you will see if I show up here in July as your new president. And then lastly, I'll just say that this is more about a presidency for me. This is not just about being a college president, but it's about being your college president. This is what I want to do. Since I have been looking into this position, when I looked at the profile, your mission, the innovative work you've been doing, I think I can contribute. And I think that I could be part of helping move everything forward alongside you over the next coming years. And lastly, I'll say Mohave kind of feels like coming home for me. I told you I spent time, my family and I, in Pueblo, Colorado. I love the high desert. And so coming back to the Southwest has felt really good. I landed, I drove here, and I went, oh. And so rural communities have been a hallmark of where I've always done my work. It's where I want to be, and I have really enjoyed all of that. And rural life and strong community ties are just part of who I am and the work I want to do. So thank you for letting me join you here and learn more from all of you. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to learning more in the rest of the time to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chrissy Holliday.